Are you brave enough to face the unknown? The old car rumbled down the deserted highway, windshield wipers battling against the relentless rain. John gripped the steering wheel, a knot of anticipation in his stomach. Beside him, Lisa stared out at the storm-tossed landscape. They had been dreaming of this escape for months. Their new life awaited, nestled somewhere in the heart of the storm. Lisa had found a Victorian manor perched on a hilltop. The price was unbelievably low. The sheer size of the house intimidated John, but Lisa saw potential, a canvas for their dreams. The closer they got, the heavier the atmosphere grew. The rain intensified, blurring the world outside. A sense of unease settled over Lisa. Lightning illuminated the manor, revealing its haunting silhouette. Don't forget to like and subscribe our YouTube channel for more stories. As the car finally sputtered to a stop at the end of the gravel driveway, the full weight of the old house pressed down on them. It stood on the crest of the hill, a monolithic presence against the swirling grey sky. The rain had stopped as suddenly as it had begun, leaving behind a heavy silence that amplified the eerie stillness of the place. John cut the engine, and for a moment they simply sat there, gazing at their new home. The house was even more imposing up close, its once grand facade now weathered and neglected. Ivy crept up the walls like grasping claws, and the windows, dark and empty, stared back at them like the eyes of a watchful stranger. "Well?" John said finally, his voice tight with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. "Here we are." Lisa, her hand resting on his arm, could only nod. She felt a strange mix of emotions, anticipation, tinged with a growing sense of unease. It was as though the house itself was watching them, judging their worthiness to cross its threshold. John reached for the handle of his door, the metal cold and damp beneath his touch. He pushed it open and the hinges groaned in protest, a sound that echoed through the heavy silence like a mournful sigh. A musty smell wafted out, the scent of damp earth and forgotten things. Taking a deep breath, John stepped inside, Lisa close behind him. As their eyes adjusted to the dimness, the interior of the house slowly revealed itself. Dust motes danced in the weak light filtering through grimy windows. Cobwebs clung to every corner, and the air hung heavy and still, thick with the weight of time and neglect. The foyer was a cavernous space with a high ceiling lost in shadow. A grand staircase, its once polished wood now dull and scratched, curved up into the darkness. An elaborate chandelier hung from the center of the ceiling, its crystals caked in dust, casting fragmented shards of light across the floor. A grandfather clock stood against one wall, its hands frozen at midnight, as if time itself had stopped within these walls. "It's something else, isn't it?" John said, his voice echoing strangely in the stillness. He ran a hand through his hair, trying to shake off the unsettling atmosphere. Lisa, however, felt a shiver run down her spine. The silence was unnerving, broken only by the creaking of the old house settling around them. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were not alone. The air seemed thick with unseen presences, whispers of forgotten lives clinging to the shadows. "It's beautiful," she whispered back, her voice barely audible above the pounding of her own heart. But she trailed off, unable to articulate the feeling of dread that was slowly coiling in her stomach. It was as if the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen, and deep down a primal instinct whispered a warning. Some houses, like some secrets, are best left undisturbed. The musty scent of the house clung to Lisa like a shroud as she began the daunting task of unpacking. Each box she opened, each piece of furniture she unwrapped, seemed to whisper forgotten stories, remnants of lives lived within these aging walls. It was exciting and unsettling all at once, like stepping into someone else's memories. John, meanwhile, had wandered off to explore their new domain. She could hear his footsteps echoing through the empty halls, a comforting counterpoint to the unsettling silence that seemed to emanate from the house itself. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of wind in the eaves sent a shiver down her spine. She carefully unwrapped a framed photograph, its glass clouded with age. It depicted a family, their faces blurred by time, their eyes staring out at her with an unnerving intensity. They were dressed in the fashion of a bygone era, their expressions formal, and unsmiling. A young girl, her face pale and serious, clutched a doll with an almost possessive grip. Lisa found herself holding her breath, as if the very act of looking at the photo might awaken something best left undisturbed. She quickly placed it face down on a nearby table, a strange disquiet settling over her. John ran his hand along the cold, damp walls as he made his way deeper into the house. Each room he entered seemed to hold its breath, waiting for him to break the spell of its long slumber. The air was heavy with the scent of dust and decay, and the silence was almost oppressive, broken only by the sound of his own footsteps. He paused in the doorway of what must have once been a grand dining room. A long mahogany table dominated the space, its surface covered in a thick layer of dust. Heavy velvet curtains, their color faded to a dull gray, blocked out most of the light, casting the room in perpetual twilight. He could almost hear the echo of laughter, the clinking of glasses, the murmur of conversation, ghosts of gatherings long past. He imagined the family from the photograph gathered around this table, their faces illuminated by flickering candlelight. What stories had these walls witnessed? What joys and sorrows had unfolded within this space? He shivered, suddenly aware of the chill that had seeped into the room. It was more than just the dampness of the old house. It felt like a presence, cold and unseen, watching him from the shadows. He continued his exploration, drawn by an almost morbid curiosity. A narrow hallway led to a small study, its walls lined with bookshelves. A single window cast a weak light on the room, illuminating a large portrait above the fireplace. The portrait was of a man, his stern face framed by a neatly trimmed beard. His eyes, however, were what held John's attention. They were dark and intense, seeming to follow his every move. John found himself holding his breath, a strange sensation creeping up his spine. The portrait was not just a painting. It was a window into the soul of the house, and the soul of the house was watching him. John's explorations led him deeper into the house. Each room unveiling another layer of faded grandeur, he found himself standing before a set of heavy wooden doors, their dark oak etched with intricate carvings. He pushed the doors open, their hinges groaning in protest, and stepped into a room unlike any he'd ever seen. The library was a sanctuary of forgotten words, a testament to a time when knowledge was a treasure to be cherished. Sunlight streamed through a large arched window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. The scent of aged paper and leather hung heavy, a comforting aroma that spoke of countless hours spent lost in thought. He ran his fingers along the spines of the books, their titles barely visible beneath a layer of dust. Each book seemed to pulsate with a life of its own, a silent history waiting to be unearthed. "Lisa, look at this!" John called out, his voice echoing in the stillness of the library. Lisa joined him, her brow furrowed with concern. The atmosphere in the room had shifted, grown heavier as if the very air were holding its breath. She peered over John's shoulder, her gaze drawn to the book in his hands. The book fell open to a random page, revealing handwritten entries in a spidery script, faded with time. Strange diagrams and intricate sketches adorned the margins, their meaning obscured by the passage of years. The language was archaic, almost indecipherable, yet Lisa felt a chill run down her spine as she realized what it was. A diary of sorts, a chronicle of their house's past. "I don't like this, John," Lisa whispered, her voice barely audible above the pounding of her own heart. "This feels wrong." A wave of dizziness washed over her and she reached out to steady herself. The book seemed to pulsate with an unnatural energy, a darkness that seeped into her bones. John, however, was captivated. The book had awakened something within him, a thirst for knowledge that overshadowed his usual pragmatism. He traced the faded ink with his fingers, his mind racing to decipher the cryptic entries. He felt an inexplicable connection to the words, as if they were whispering secrets meant only for him to hear. John turned the brittle pages carefully, each one revealing another fragment of the house's hidden history. The diary entries spoke of strange occurrences, unexplained noises, and a growing sense of unease that mirrored his own. "Do not wake the shadows. John, we should leave," Lisa pleaded, her voice trembling. She could sense the darkness closing in around them, a suffocating presence that chilled her to the core. John hesitated, torn between his growing unease and his insatiable curiosity. This house held secrets best left buried, The book had awakened something within him. He closed the book slowly, and as he met Lisa's terrified gaze, he knew that their lives would never be the same. The first night in the old house pressed down on Lisa like a suffocating blanket. John lay beside her, his breathing deep and even in sleep. But Lisa found no respite in the darkness. Every creak of the old house, every sigh of the wind against the window panes sent a jolt of fear through her. The shadows cast by the moon seemed to writhe and twist, taking on menacing shapes in the corners of her vision. She closed her eyes, willing herself to relax. But the words from the old diary echoed in her mind. Do not wake the shadows. The need for a drink finally overwhelmed her fear, and Lisa slipped out of bed, careful not to wake John. She made her way down the creaking stairs, each step echoing in the oppressive silence. The grandfather clock in the foyer stood frozen at midnight. As she reached the bottom of the stairs, a faint sound of footsteps sent a chill down her spine. She froze, her heart pounding. Taking a deep breath, Lisa told herself it was just her imagination. Clutching the candlestick tighter, she inched forward into the darkness. The kitchen was cavernous, its windows black and empty. Moonlight filtered through the grime, casting long shadows. Lisa filled a glass with water, the sound overly loud in the stillness. A cold draft swept through the room, making her shiver. She felt a presence lurking just beyond her vision. Spinning around, her candle flame danced wildly, but there was nothing there. She hurried back to the bedroom, slipping into bed beside John. The memory of that cold presence lingered, whispering of unseen forces. The following morning, John insisted on a walk, hoping the fresh air would soothe Lisa's anxieties. Sunlight streamed through the canopy, dappling the forest floor, birds chirping and fluttering around, a symphony of nature's resilience. John walked with an easy gait, his fingers intertwining with Lisa's. "See?" he said reassuringly. "Nothing to be afraid of." Lisa managed a faint smile, but the fear lingered. The deeper they ventured, the heavier the atmosphere grew, the silence pressing down on them. They emerged into a clearing, revealing an ancient well. John, ever the pragmatist, saw only an old relic. "Look at this, Lisa!" he called out. Lisa hesitated, a shiver running down her spine. The well emanated a palpable coldness, a sense of wrongness. As she stepped closer, dizziness washed over her. She stumbled, the world tilting. The well was not just a well, it was something ancient and evil. As Lisa's vision swam, a horrifying image formed. She saw their house, the walls breathing, shadows pulsing with life. The shadows coalesced, forming eerie figures. They flowed through the house, drawn to the book in the library. One shadow detached, gliding towards her. Its face contorted in torment. It whispered, "The well. It is the key." The vision faded, leaving Lisa gasping for breath. Lisa crumpled to the ground, trembling with fear. John rushed to her side, concern etched on his face. "Lisa, what happened? Are you all right?" She looked up, eyes wide with terror. "The well," she whispered. "We need to leave, now!" Struggling to her feet, John's arm around her, they sensed a palpable shift in the atmosphere. A darkness had settled over the clearing. They hurried back through the forest, the air eerily silent. The shadows lengthened unnaturally, urging them forward. "Lisa," John said, pulling her to a stop, "you need to tell me what's going on. I saw shadows, John. They were alive, and they were drawn to the book." The words tumbled out, disjointed but true. John's skepticism gave way to unease. They had stumbled upon something ancient and evil. They had to act quickly. They made it back to the house as dusk settled. The house loomed, its windows dark and empty. John retrieved the old diary, flipping through its pages. He found a passage describing the well as a conduit to something ancient. The shadows were restless spirits drawn to the well's energy. The air crackled with energy, the shadows stirring. They were coming for them. As night fell, the shadows grew bolder. John lit a fire, hoping to chase away the chill. Lisa huddled beside him, her eyes darting nervously. The shadows writhed at the edge of the firelight. John's gaze fell upon the old diary, searching for answers. The key lay within the well, the conduit for the dark forces. They had to act quickly. John grabbed the kerosene lantern and they hurried out into the night. The moon offered little comfort in the oppressive darkness. They ran through the trees, branches clawing at their clothes. They had to reach the well to sever the connection. The forest conspired against them, leading them deeper into the darkness. They burst into the clearing where the well stood. The shadows had gathered, a vortex of darkness. Panic welled up inside Lisa, but John's determination gave her resolve. They had to fight back. John opened the diary, finding the key to their salvation. He recited the words aloud, the shadows recoiling. The well pulsed with an eerie light. The final confrontation was upon them, freedom at a price. Silence falls. The last syllable faded into the pre-dawn stillness. John closed the diary, the leather cold against his fingertips. The silence was absolute, broken only by distant chirping birds. Shadows vanished as if they had never been. He turned to Lisa, searching her eyes. Her eyes held relief and lingering apprehension. Hand in hand they walked back, their terror replaced by exhaustion. The first rays of dawn painted the sky in hues of rose and gold. Section 2, The Weight of Shadows. They stood for a long moment, just gazing at the house that had for a brief, terrifying time been their home. John squeezed Lisa's hand, a silent question passing between them. "It's over," she whispered. "We're safe now." They had been touched by something ancient and powerful. They turned and walked towards the house, their steps lighter now. Section 3, A House of Echoes. The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. They packed swiftly, unable to linger within the house's walls any longer than necessary. The silence was now welcome, a balm to their frayed nerves. John found himself drawn back to the library. The old diary lay open, filled with cryptic entries, a chilling reminder of the darkness they had confronted. He picked up the framed photograph Lisa had found, of the family who had lived and died within these walls. He studied their faces, no longer strangers, but fellow travelers into the unknown. He placed the photograph back, a silent promise forming in his heart. Section 4, A House of Echoes. The drive back to the village was quiet, filled with unspoken thoughts and relief. John glanced at Lisa, her gaze fixed on the house in the rearview mirror. The old house stood alone on the hilltop, bathed in the warm light of the rising sun, and as they drove away, John couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't leaving empty-handed. Don't forget to like and subscribe our YouTube channel for more stories.